How do we walk in a world that seems to create so much angst within as well as without?
Is that pain a wake-up call for us?
What is ours to do in this space where so many need support, where things appear to be crumbling, where it feels sometimes like the world is turning upside down?
We need to recognize when we are projecting and understand that this leads to suffering.
When I give myself the power to still and be inside myself, I'm able to view the world from a different perspective, a lens that not only sees a bigger picture, but also discerns what is mine to do, where my actions might create interference as opposed to support.
Breathing, getting quiet, closing our eyes so we won't be distracted by the things that are outside of us.
Where my intentions may go wayward or may be aligned, and where my energy may be fueling and amplifying what's outside, or be alchemized toward a greater good.
Welcome. You have entered the realm of 1111 Talk Radio. Your host is SIMRAN. It's time to discover your own language with the universe. Empower yourself, broaden your mind, open your heart, and discover who you are. Now, here's your host, SIMRAN.
So often as we move through our own human experience, we are pulled out into the world with so many distractions, so many things that seem to call for our attention, or simply that pull us out of our bodies in the way that we have lost sense of self, that we must reclaim ourselves and return back to the truth of who we are and why we're here. My guest today is Paul Ferrini. If there's an individual that truly epitomizes the mystic, the truth teller, the visionary, the individual that walks his talk and has been a teacher of teachers for many, it is Paul Ferrini. Your brother's freedom is but a symbol for your own. Therefore, let him come and go gracefully. Welcome him when he comes and bid him farewell when he goes. More than that you cannot do. This much is enough. Care for each stranger in this way, and I will show you a world where trust has returned and charity rules. This is from one of Paul's books. His unique blend of spirituality and psychology goes beyond self-help and recovery into the heart of healing, and today's discussion is hopefully going to touch some of those places that feel tender. Welcome, Paul. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Where I'd like to start is the heart. With so much that is going on in the world, the fear that is so easy to be distracted by, it can often be difficult to come into the heart. So often people believe they're in the heart, but they're just thinking love, or they're thinking their way towards something, not actually being there. Provide the distinction if they're really thinking they're in the heart or if they're actually in the heart.
I think the doorway to the heart is silence. I wrote a book, you recorded it, called Silence of the Heart. If we don't get quiet, it's hard to sink down through the various levels of consciousness into a safe space inside where we feel connected to God or to our source. It just takes a little while for that sinking down process to happen. And if we are looking outward, being distracted by the things in the world that are clawing at us, seeking our attention, it's very hard for us to come inside into the inner temple. So that's why meditation is an important part of the spiritual process. But even without calling it meditation, what I call it is just breathing, getting quiet, maybe closing our eyes so we won't be distracted by the things that are outside of us, and allowing us to make that sacred journey from our head to our heart. Being in the heart is completely different from being in our heads. When we're in our heads, we're preoccupied with a lot of details. There's a lot of conflict and anxiety, but when we come into the heart, We come into a place of acceptance of ourselves, acceptance of life the way it is. And in that space, we can begin to feel this energetic connection to love.
When the world is so frenetic and busy, when we've got smart cities and smart homes and smart technology on our phones, when there's this constant pull externally, many individuals would say, how do I find the time? Time is my enemy right now. I just have to get so many things done. How do you assist people in prioritizing space to move into the heart, space for presence?
Well, pain is the big wake-up call. Pain tells us there's something that's not in balance. And so most people don't begin to take the journey into the heart until they feel in pain. The pain is based on having a lot of interpersonal conflict and triggers, emotional upheaval, jealousy, anger, projection, all kinds of psychological problems which disturb our peace. If we can live with that and we can be lost in the world and be triggered without feeling pain, then we're going to stay in that place because that's where most people live. But when we start to feel the pain of the disconnection from our true self and our disconnection from spirit, that's when we have the incentive to take the journey. And it is voluntary. No one's going to make us take it. So we have to be ready to take it. We have to be willing to let go of all those distractions that preoccupy us, recognizing that that's what brings us into this pain body.
There are many that are feeling the pain of a lot of flux in our society, even in our own political system or healthcare system, banking system, all these different systems. And that drama or that Maya of the world will keep people in that place of fear, fight, flight, freeze. You blend spirituality and psychotherapy in a unique way. Talk about how these two things have to be intertwined now, how they must be linked as a pathway back inside the self.
Well, one of the things that we understand when we study psychology is the mechanism of projection, where we take the unhealed aspects of ourselves and we project it onto other people. This creates conflict in our relationships, conflict in our world. We need to recognize when we are projecting and understand that this leads to suffering. And the way that we can overcome projection is through awareness. And so one of the things that I teach is called the Crash Course in Boundaries. And it's very simple. And I tell all of my students to memorize it and use it every day in their lives. It's just one sentence. Everything I think, say, feel, and do belongs to me. And everything you think, feel, say, and do belongs to you. So you can call me names. You can say you're a jerk. You can say I hate you. You can say all kinds of things about me, but they really don't say anything about me. You are the origin of all those thoughts and feelings. So all those things belong to you. And even though you'd like to give them to me and make me responsible for your pain, I am not and never will be. I will not take on your pain. I will refuse to take on your pain, but I will totally become responsible for my own pain, my own thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. And when I do that, I take you off the hook. And I say, that's not about you. I may be judging you. I see the judgment. I recognize the judgment. I understand that judgment is not justified. It's not about you. It's really about me. I own it. I take responsibility for it. I take you off the hook. And that leads not only to a very deep communion with myself and willingness to look at my own shadow, but it leads to releasing conflict in the world because I am stopping the process of projection. Process of projection is where I put the unhealed aspects of myself into the world. I project them on you and on other people and on leaders that are out there, on what's going on in that big movie screen where there's always conflict. There's never been a time where the world did not reflect all the conflict of all the souls who live on the planet.
And so when we look at the divisiveness that we see in the world or within a relationship inside of our home, that observation, is that a judgment, the type of projection that we also need to bring back in, or a pointer back to ourselves as well?
Well, anything that disturbs our peace needs to be looked at. It needs to be owned. I need to take responsibility for all those things that are going on in my consciousness, which are disturbing my peace. And if I try to make you responsible for them, I will get involved in a big external drama and there will be no end to it. It will go round and around and around. The only way I can end conflict is within my own consciousness. So I need to be responsible. If I'm unhappy, if I'm triggered, if I'm angry, if I judge you or judge anyone else, this is my problem. This is my issue. This does not belong to anyone else. So am I willing to look at it? Am I willing to find the source of my pain, which frequently goes back to early childhood? Am I willing to look at my shadow material? That's what the journey is all about. It's the journey through the dark night of the soul into the light.
When we look at this dark night experience, so often individuals will get to a place where they feel like they've healed something. There can be this comment of, oh, I've dealt with that. I've healed that. I'm past that. And from my own experience of being a very devoted disciple of wanting to continually expand and touch the essence of myself, I reached a moment where I had done so much work and yet hit one of those external experiences that was so painful and held so much grief that I realized there's still so much more to do. Can you talk a little bit about the necessity for us to be willing to embrace those dark places, to move through those passages of grief or whatever the darkness is introducing us to in order to reclaim that light?
Yeah. Well, it's not easy for any of us. We all are triggered. We all have extremely painful experiences in our lives. There's not a single human being who can avoid that. And the question then is that pain a wake-up call for us? Is that pain saying to us, okay, I have more work to do? And am I willing to do that work? Or am I just going to stuff it and try to get over it and try to function in the world, even though I'm broken inside? And if I try to function in the world when I'm broken inside, it's not going to work. I'm just going to experience more pain until it gets to a crisis point. And then I will finally have to decide whether I'm willing to do the hard work at looking at my own demons. We all have them. There's not a single human being that does not have a shadow. But as we take the journey and as we learn to be very honest with ourselves, that shadow begins little by little to lighten up and to eventually become transparent and integrated into the psyche. And then we're not projecting all of our inner conflict out onto others. And we do find that then the outer world begins to reflect the integration that's happened within consciousness.
My own embrace of the darkness revealed that we do have this cyclical experiential path that we continually follow through life. There are animals, shadows, monsters, demons inside of us that we must not only face but embrace to bring those to the light. You speak a lot about how the path is circular, and even in your 8 Keys to the Kingdom, guide individuals to move through those keys with the understanding that they will again and again and again. Can you talk about the circular path? Is that also a spiral path?
Well, it's definitely a circular path. Basically, the way things are set up the spiritual, psychological challenge of life is to learn from our mistakes. It's not impossible to do, but it's very challenging. So if we make a big mistake, if we are cruel to other people or to ourselves, we will eventually have to feel the pain of that betrayal of self or betrayal of others, which are two sides of the same coin. Pain is the doorway. Until we feel the pain of that transgression, we can't heal it. So it's the nature of life to keep bringing these things up over and over and over again until we are able to heal it. So, for example, we may experience a deep daddy wound or mommy wound when we're growing up. We then may marry or enter into a significant relationship with a person who is a reflection of mommy or daddy, and that gives us another opportunity to heal with mommy or daddy. And then we may meet people at work who trigger us, and that gives us another opportunity to heal. So these opportunities to heal our wounds keep coming up until we finally are able to do it. That's the blessing of the journey, is that we have many opportunities, and it is a massive conceit. It's one of the most important awarenesses that we need to have, is that the spiritual journey is not a linear journey to the mountaintop. It is a circular journey in which things keep coming up until we heal them. That's true for all of us. So it takes tremendous courage to go through these healing events, healing opportunities in our life, but it does pay off eventually. And it's like peeling that skin of the onion. So maybe that when you say spiral, maybe that's what you're talking about. I'm not sure. But as we peel the skin of the onion, the more subtle layers of self-betrayal or betrayal of others begin to surface. As we heal the deeper levels, the more subtle levels come up. So healing is a constant process, and we're healing at deeper and deeper levels the same stuff. This continues throughout our whole lifetime. It never stops. And people who think, oh, I'm going to get to the point where I've just got it all figured out and everything's hunky-dory, they're unfortunately just setting themselves up for a continual series of disappointments. It doesn't work like that.
My life has brought forth the awareness that our true purpose, my true purpose, is removing the barriers to love, to continually learn what it means to experience self-love. And only then can I really love the world as it is. The life purpose that so often people become preoccupied with, the preoccupation or occupation, is often the personhood or ego from my point of view. Can you talk about what you consider our true life purpose?
Well, I had a friend who contacted me maybe 40 years ago who had been doing my work. And she said, this is the last call I'm going to make. She was feeling suicidal. And I said to her, well, you do have free will. You can decide to kill yourself. You can decide to throw in the towel. But I want you to know that this is not going to end your suffering. You have only one thing that you've been asked to do in this lifetime, and that is to learn to love yourself. And if you leave without having learned to love yourself, you will have to keep repeating the journey until you finally learn. And you are right. Our ability to love other people is totally dependent on our ability to love ourselves. We extend our capacity to love and embrace all aspects of ourselves to other people. We can't love anyone else if we have not learned to love ourselves. That's what the spiritual path is all about. And that's why I talk about relationship as a spiritual path. Relationship teaches us that self-love is the foundation for harmony in any of our relationships. Self-love and the understanding of boundaries, understanding what belongs to us and what doesn't belong to us.
You are releasing 2 new books. I want to mention the first one since you've brought up relationship, and it is titled Relationship, the Divine Dance. And so when we look at relationship in the context that you've just stated, This means we focus on the relationship with ourself first. In healing that, we move outward. How does that relate to the relationship with others, with the world, with injustice, with the divine? How is that all interconnected?
Most of us tend to put the cart before the horse. I mean, it would be great if we could put the horse before the cart and learn to love ourselves and then try to love other people, but that's not how it works.
Like all your brothers and sisters, you suffer from a basic sense of inadequacy and unworthiness. You feel that you have made terrible mistakes which will sooner or later catch up with you. You expect to be punished for your sins and are waiting for the shoe to drop. These unresolved issues of self-worth are the conditions of your embodiment. In other words, you are here to work them out. This is from one of Paul's books, and I invite you to find out more at lightforthesoul.com. Larry Dawsey says that Paul Ferrini is a modern-day Khalil Gibran, a poet, a mystic, a visionary, a teller of truth. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said that Paul's books are the most important she'd ever read, that she studied them like a Bible. And Iyanla Van Zandt said that Paul Ferrini is an important teacher in the new millennium. Paul has just released a lovely new book, Relationship, the Divine Dance, which is an in-depth exploration of relationship with ourselves, with others, and our relationship with the divine. Find out more about all of Paul's books, his audiobooks, and his upcoming retreat at lightforthesoul.com. We'll be right back with more of Paul Ferrini right after these messages.
You are listening to 1111 Talk Radio. SIMRAN is an award-winning author, publisher of 1111 Magazine, powerful speaker of wisdom, and a life mentor. Find out more at IamSimran.com. Now, back to 1111 Talk Radio.
I hope you'll go to 1111mag.com and be sure and register for the 1111 Collective. Be informed of all the wonderful guest shows and releases that are coming your way from 1111 Magazine and 1111 Talk Radio. I have a certain group of authors that I personally love reading, and I would say that Paul Ferrini is at the top of that pile. Paul Ferrini is the author of some 50 books on love, healing, and forgiveness. His unique blend of spirituality and psychology goes beyond self-help and recovery into the heart of healing. Find out about the new upcoming retreat in May 2025, in addition to his spiritual psychotherapy training and new book called Spiritual Psychotherapy, and the second new book he is releasing titled Relationship, the Divine Dance. The website is lightforthesoul.com. When we look at relationship in the context that you've just stated, how does that relate to the relationship with others, with the world, with injustice, with the divine? How is that all interconnected?
Most of us tend to put the cart before the horse. I mean, it would be great if we could put the horse before the cart and learn to love ourselves and then try to love other people, but that's not how it works. Most of us tend to put the cart before the horse. I mean, it would be great if we could put the horse before the cart and learn to love ourselves and then try to love other people, but that's not how it works. Most of us try to put the cart before the horse. We try to love other people before we've learned to love ourselves. And of course, it doesn't work. We make a big mess. We go into pain. And then we begin to ask the question, what do I need to do? Is there something essentially wrong with me? Or am I just not doing a spiritual practice that works? So our pain teaches us to learn how to love ourselves and to build the foundation in order to be able to be capable of manifesting an equal relationship with another human being. Our pain inevitably wakes us up. I mean, it would be great if we didn't have to do that, but most people do experience pain, and that gives them the incentive to grow psychologically and spiritually.
Sometimes I observe individuals attempting to feel worthy or good because they are participating. Is that a moment of pause to say, let me first take care of myself? Let me first look at this need to go do for someone else and how I'm perhaps neglecting the self? Because self-love is such a nebulous, often simple thing to do in theory, but yet it's really hard. Self-love is a very hard thing to stay with.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to look for approval outside of ourselves. We want mommy's love, we want daddy's approval, and that continues throughout our whole life. We want our partner's approval and acceptance, and we want approval and acceptance at work. And when it doesn't come, we blame ourselves and we beat ourselves up. After we've done that for 30 or 40 years, the pain becomes intense. And then it's time to wake up and to realize I am never going to get approval or acceptance from the outside world, not from mommy, not from daddy, not from partner, not from coworkers. Only I can bring the love and the acceptance that I need. That's why in my work, I say over and over again, we are the bringers of love. When we have learned to bring love to ourselves, then we become capable of receiving it from others. Until we've learned to bring love to ourselves, we are incapable of receiving it from other people.
And that points to the next place, which is presence. And I think many people might believe they are present. You know, there have been times in my life where I thought I was present to come to find out how I was not present. That's another one that can be a great challenge for many to keep bringing themselves back to the present moment.
Being in the present moment is the essence of meditation. That's why we meditate. That's why we go into the silent, to become physically, emotionally present in this moment, which means we're not thinking about something else. We're not worried about something that happened in the past or concerned or anxious about something that might happen in the future. We're just right here and right now. You know, when we're in that space of being present, it's all about baby steps. So the book that I wrote, Keys to the Kingdom, gives us questions that we can ask that are very profound tools for staying in the moment and staying connected to our true self. So one of the mantras that people work with, and key number one, is to ask moment to moment, am I loving myself right now? And usually when you ask that question and you answer it honestly, the answer is no, I'm not loving myself. Well, we don't use that to beat ourselves up. We use that to realize, oh, okay, I forgot. The reason I'm here is to be the bringer of love to my experience. So let me focus on that right now in this moment. And then all of these questions keep bringing us back to ourselves in this moment so that we can have the experience of connecting to love, connecting to who we really are, so that we stop looking for approval outside of ourselves and we begin to give that acceptance from the inside out. These are all spiritual practices. It's hard to learn how to love yourself if you're not engaged in spiritual practices that help you to do that. You know, you could just take one. You don't have to take all eight. I mean, I think they're all different versions of the same practice, but you can just take that one practice. Am I loving myself right now? Take that throughout the day. Ask that question. And that will be a continual reminder that that's why you're here. You're here to bring love to yourself. Or in the inner child constellation, to realize that the little child who is in you, who is not healed, that's the one who needs love right now in this moment.
Continually bringing oneself to the awareness of what is loving to self would pull them away from the world. So I imagine many listeners might be asking, well, how do I be in the world if I'm constantly focusing on myself?
As I said to someone in the class I recently did, you don't go into the silence to permanently escape from the world. You go into the silence to connect to your true self, so then you can be in the world in a harmonious way. So we're not asking people to live in a monastery or to isolate themselves, but We are asking people to find the source of love within and then to live from the inside out rather than from the outside in. And that's something we learn how to do. It takes a lot of practice. So, for example, if I'm sitting in the silence and I'm asking the question, am I loving myself right now? And I recognize that I'm judging myself. I'm feeling sorry for myself. I'm beating myself up. Well, of course, the answer is no, I'm not loving myself. And I need to bring love in that moment. If I'm sitting in the silence and I'm judging you, well, the same applies. I am not loving myself. If I'm judging you, I am not loving myself. So whatever's happening, whatever is triggering us in life is because we have forgotten what our true purpose is in this lifetime, which is to learn to love ourselves and to focus on that and to build our lives out of that connection to spirit. When we love ourselves, we are connected to spirit. When we love ourselves, we can begin to move outward into the world, carrying that love and radiating it out to other people. That's how service works. Service does not happen just by trying to be a do-gooder and go out and save everybody else. That falls apart very quickly when you haven't learned to love yourself. We go inside to make that connection. And as we are able to sustain the connection, we then take and move outward into the world as a beacon of light, as a bringer of love, not just to ourselves, but to others as well. But in any moment, if we forget where the source is, we will self-destruct and love will not be emanating from us. So that's why our spiritual practice is so essential, moment to moment, understanding why we are here, becoming more and more skillful in connecting to the source of love within our own hearts.
And so often when we are engaging in that spiritual practice, what does tend to happen are lots of the thoughts, the fears, the anxieties, the angst, the sensations in the body that begin to rise, the distrust of, am I going to be safe, taken care of? Is life going to support me? You stated, the river knows where I have to go. Talk a little bit about trusting the river.
Well, you can't trust the river if you don't trust yourself and you don't trust anybody else. So you see, when we're talking about surrender, which is one of the fruits of a long spiritual practice, there's a lot that comes before that. We can't even talk about surrender if we haven't learned to love ourselves. That's toward the end of the journey. We need to start at the beginning. The beginning is understanding that we have an antagonistic relationship with ourselves. And that antagonistic relationship with ourselves outpictures as an antagonistic relationship with other people and creates conflict, constant conflict and suffering in our lives. So the only way I begin to turn that around is by cultivating a loving, compassionate, charitable relationship with myself, forgiving myself for my mistakes, and holding my mistakes in awareness so that I do not repeat them. This is a process of self-redemption. Forget about redeeming the world if you haven't redeemed yourself.
I think one of the life skills, or you could call it life lessons, that I have had, which I feel like is probably true for a lot of people, is that of patience. We want things fast, Paul. We want it to be done.
Yeah,
We want to know that
that's
we've
right.
reached the mountaintop. Spiritual practice is a patient practice, yes?
Yeah, so let's go back to the river, right? When you push the river, what happens? You find out the river is stronger than you are. You can't push the river. Surrendering to the current of the river happens very late in the spiritual journey. But in the beginning, we're always trying to push the river. We're trying to make our will happen, our ego structure. We're trying to focus on that. And our ego structure is what blocks us from the connection to love. So the journey begins by seeing our own ego structure. Now, the beautiful thing is, all you have to do is hold it in awareness. You don't have to fix yourself. You can't fix yourself anyway. But you need to see the block to love in your heart. You need to see all the ways that you betray yourselves and betray others. And when you hold that in awareness, you can no longer do it. So awareness is the biggest tool on the spiritual path. We cannot force anything. We cannot fix ourselves. But when we see clearly and we hold all that self-betrayal in awareness, the only way we can betray ourselves is to consciously betray ourselves, and most of us do not do that. Most of our betrayal is unconscious.
That's one of the big illusions of the world right now is, and especially even in the spiritual field, a lot of practices or things are interpreted or even framed as fixing, or that we can fix something that's going on in society, or we can fix something
There are a
there.
lot of people out there who are trying to fix the world, especially now, but the world isn't broken. So we have to say, okay, am I trying to fix you? Am I trying to fix myself? Where is this fixing coming from? This is an ego agenda. It assumes there's something wrong with me or something wrong with you or something wrong in the world that needs to be fixed. That's simply the perception of the ego. The truth is, there's nothing about you or me that needs to be fixed. Each one of us is a manifestation of the divine in our true nature. So we do not have to fix ourselves and we do not have to fix each other. What we need to do is to honor ourselves, to love ourselves, to respect and accept ourselves, and do the same for others. And then we build a different consciousness and a different world.
And that's more leaning into not my will, but thy will be done.
Thy will be done. Yes.
I know you've got a retreat coming up that I'll share more about at the end of the show for those that want information. But speak a little bit to the experience that individuals can have. Who is this retreat for, and what is foundational purpose for which it is being held?
Well, the retreat is for anybody who's in pain who wants to get out of pain. That's always the bottom line. It doesn't make sense for anybody to come to any of my retreats or even read any of my books if they haven't decided that they want to end suffering in their lives. And if they haven't realized that in order to do that, it means they're going to take a journey. And it's not an easy journey. Those who are serious about healing are welcome to come to my retreat. It's helpful if they have read some of my books so that they know what to expect. If they've done a previous workshop or retreat, then they'll have an idea what they're in for. This is the first in-person retreat I've done since COVID, so it's a real opportunity for our international community to gather. I expect it will be a very powerful event.
You also have spiritual psychotherapy training and a new book on spiritual psychotherapy so that practitioners of psychotherapy can bring spirituality into their practices?
Yeah, exactly. What I have found in my own spiritual counseling practice is that people go through crisis. They're not able to negotiate those crisis times without having a spiritual perspective about what's happening. People go through a midlife crisis big time. They may go through a crisis in their 20s or their 60s. Crisis is experienced as having your whole life feel like it's falling apart. Family members may not understand what's happening with you, spouses, coworkers, and you feel very alone and very disconnected from yourself and others when you go through a crisis like that. Most therapists, certainly not all, but many therapists do not have a spiritual framework for dealing with crisis. So part of what I did was design a training for people who are psychotherapists who want to bring spiritual awareness and spiritual practices into their own life and healing, and who want to be able to share those with their clients. And it's been a very powerful experience. And the book I wrote has grown out of that work that I've been doing for the last 7 or 8 months with these participants in the program. They will be at the retreat along with other students of my work.
I know that all of your work has everything to do with connecting with our core self, opening to the heart, surrounding ourselves in the deepening of self-love and connecting with the core self. And the ego, the personhood, can make up all kinds of things about what that essence or core self is. How do you define that?
Well, I use the word essence to define the core self. It's who we really are in our heart of hearts. It's something that is deeper down than our persona or our shadow. The persona is the mask that we built up and learned to wear to get acceptance in the world. The shadow is the part of us that we're scared of. It's our fear and our shame. But our core self is behind all of that and deeper down than all of that, because in our core self is our innocence. And we need to find our way through the shadow to the core self to begin this process of psychological integration that will open all the doors in our lives.
The very first book that was put in my hands that had the greatest impact on my own spiritual path was Love Without Conditions. And when I look at the world and I look at humanity, not collective humanity only, but our individual humanity, it feels like those three words are what are most vital right now for us to have love without conditions.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's not just a concept, it's a practice. A concept doesn't mean much if you're not practicing. That practice helps us to internalize the conceptual level. It helps us to integrate into the psyche. We learned strategies of self-behavior, self-betrayal over a whole lifetime and practicing self-betrayal. But, we're not going to just overnight be able to shift things from conditional love to unconditional love. We need to practice so that we can integrate unconditional love into our lives.
Love your neighbor as you would love yourself. Make him equally important. Do not sacrifice for him or ask him to sacrifice for you, but help him when you can and receive his help gratefully when you need it. This simple, dignified exchange is a gesture of love and acceptance. More than this is too much. Less than this is too little. Love without conditions. This is from one of Paul's books, and I invite you to find out more. Go to lightforthesoul.com. He has 2 new books, Relationship, The Divine Dance, and also a second book, Spiritual Psychotherapy, which has been born out of the training just completed with therapists to integrate spiritual practices with clients. And definitely look up the retreat that's coming up in May to be in community with others. If you are new to Paul Ferrini's work, you can contact him directly to see if this is the time for that or the time for his books or one of the other trainings. Be sure to reach out to him. Once again, thank you, Paul, for all of your work, for impacting my life so deeply, and for being on 1111 Talk Radio.
Thank you, Simran.
I hope you'll go to 1111mag.com and be sure and register for the 1111 Collective. Be informed of all the wonderful guest shows and releases that are coming your way from 1111 Magazine and 1111 Talk Radio. Until next week, I am Simran, in love, of love, with love, and as love. Be well.
Thank you for opening your mind to a new reality, your heart to greater compassion, and your experience of aliveness with 1111 Talk Radio. Join host Simran next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time to step through the gateway of conscious living. You are not on the journey. You are the journey.